Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel here on YouTube, where we've got the TNT takes for you on the Challenge World Championship, Episode 3. That's right, I'm back. I'm your host, Chris, and with me on this somewhat different podcast slash video on YouTube is my co-host, my ride or die, the mercenary I brought in for this scene, Kahuna. Kahuna, how you doing?
I'm doing amazing. I'm doing really well. I'm excited for the season. We started out with a bang, and we kind of we'll talk about it. It's a great season, World Championship. I'm excited about everything that's going on, and I can't wait to talk about it with you.
Yeah, well, firstly, you were very low on it. We did our live for Australian Survivor last night, and I said to you, I need to go and watch this, and you were very low on it. So because your expectation was that low, I think I was a little bit higher than you on the episode, even though there is still a lot wrong with the episode. But I feel like you kind of did me a favor, Kahuna, by letting me know that it wasn't a good episode in your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, I was coming off what I thought was a pretty good episode 2, a very good episode 2. And then rolling into that episode 3, I was expecting more. So yeah, where our expectations were set, maybe got a different experience for you. I rewatched it, and I don't think I was as hard on it on the second watch round, and I see why they're doing some of the things that they did. It still like sits funny with some of the choices they made as far as the season structure and formatting and editing and that, but I can see, I think now what they're doing, I kind of get the idea. So I
feel
like that.
Yeah, I feel like this episode, I saw some people online say that it was a bit of a filler episode. There was, we're used to seeing a daily challenge, but because of where they finished the episode, there was a lot of talking and strategizing happening before they went out to the elimination. And maybe we don't normally see as much of this as we did in this episode. And it did feel at some points that they were almost stretching out the storyline a little bit, but I can see different storylines being set up for the whole season in this episode. And hopefully it'll pay dividends as we continue throughout this season. Also, for those that are watching this at a later stage, we don't have the live crowd here today, or tonight, I should say, like we normally do, which I love doing these podcasts and these recaps live with everybody in the audience and bringing up the comments. Sadly, we don't have that at the moment. But like I said last week, my schedule is still all over the place. So sometimes we're going to have to pre-record it like we're doing here tonight, and we'll put it on at a time that makes sense for everybody over there in the United States, because I know that's where predominantly most of our audience is that are watching the challenge content. And I will try and jump in the premiere and put some comments in if I can during the time that it's on as well, but I will be on the road during that time. So a little bit different here this week, but we will come back and do some lives in between as well whenever we can, because Kahuna, I think both you and I, we get a lot of energy from our live audience and the questions that they have, and sometimes they know even more than us, and they jog our memory as to some of the things that's happened.
Yeah, and it's that back and forth that sparks more conversation from us. So a chatter will throw out a question that just sparks more and more, and then that opens more questions. So yeah, the back and forth is great, but also sometimes when you can just concentrate on the conversation at hand, and get to the breakdown and the nitty gritty, that's always good too. So a bit of variety, I guess, for your content, which is good.
Yeah, and it's a great episode for it. Like we said, there was a lot going on, a lot of conversations happening in the house. We start off before we get into the episode with the intro, and we didn't really talk about that in the previous recap that we did. But Kahuna, I kind of feel like they took a leaf out of the Australian challenge and some of the other international challenges, and they're bringing in these intros with the players and the flags behind them that I have to say, I'm a big fan of it. I think it looks really cool. It reminds me of Survivor whenever you used to have the intro with all the different players and the different tribes. How do you feel about seeing these intros and the reminder of who's Team USA, Team Australia, Team Argentina? They probably did it for that very reason, because it can get confusing since this is a world championship.
Yeah, it made me like forget that it's not really a big part of normal MTV challenge. I was like, oh, that's actually really cool, and it stood out so much. I was like, it's a visual spectacle. You get to see them posing like badasses against, really cool backdrops, and it looks good. That it doesn't like drag out. They're not like doing too much with it. Just quick flashes, names, get to know them, and a reminder when there's so many different teams, especially for players you've never seen before or challenges you've never seen before. It helps to have that little visual every week. I like it.
Mm. Now, the beginning of this episode, we start off with Janae and Kellyanne. It's kind of where we left off. Will she or won't she? That was the question we were asking ourselves after last episode. And that carries on for the majority. I feel like maybe 2/3 of this episode. And Kellyanne is at her absolute breaking point. And she now confides in Tristan, who seems to be a bit of a hothead himself, but he says that he's going to have to play within himself. What do you think this means for this duo going forward in the game? Because they're both a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, it doesn't bode well for, for Kellyanne and Tristan. I mean, we know Tristan's a champion, but like for someone who hasn't watched the UK, it's hard to see that through what we've got so far. At least up until that point, and seeing him fail so miserably, and Kellyanne on the spiral as well, like emotionally, they're not sort of doing too. They're having a horror couple of episodes back to back. So Tristan and Kellyanne, I feel for him for sure.
I feel like Tristan is also one of those people that needs someone that is the calm to his chaos in the game, and someone that can, sort of bring him down. And Kellyanne clearly is not that partner for him. And that's why it's so important that you choose an opposite when it comes to the challenge, and you choose someone that is good at something you're not great at. And sadly for both of them, they didn't really have a choice. I think someone said Kellyanne felt bad about being picked last. She wasn't picked. She was assigned Tristan at the end of the game.
Yeah, I don't know. Like when you perform poorly, you get the worst results, and you kind of end up with this. And I feel like knowing Kellyanne's past, I wonder if there was an element like I feel like Nelson, we said last week, was like one of these things is not like the other, and I think he might have been put into the cast to be one of these first initial boots. Before the big guns really go at each other, because what you don't want to see is having a Wes have to take out a Jordan or a Bananas in the first couple episodes. Give him a few, maybe 3 or 4, and then you can let the big guys go at it. So I wonder if Nelson was there for that, and Kellyanne might unfortunately be the other side for the females, I think.
What would you say this friendship between Kellyanne and Janae is going to be like moving forward now? Because, ultimately they talk about them being friends for many years outside of the game. I remember some people in the live calling it out last week when we did the live, that they said, well, Kellyanne and Janae has never been that close, but the show is making it sound like they're extremely close outside of the game. And as someone that's a newer school fan, I don't really remember them being all that well connected. I only know that they've played together in the last couple of All-Star seasons.
Yeah, I thought that's where the I guess recency bias makes friendships feel stronger. So I was wondering if maybe it was from the All Stars, and going through that, because she beat her in the finals, and she like they were through from the start to the end. They were time, so
I think it was a draw the first season that they were on. They both got, I can't remember if it was 3rd or 4th place. They were equal in points in that first final, the one that Yes won, and then they've played another season after that together as well, which I believe was All Stars 3. Yeah. And I feel like there was this friendship or camaraderie that was sort of born there that she felt like was going to be, a thing coming into this season.
And that's always the difficulty of when we sort of compare like Survivor to the challenge, is the relationships that are ongoing beyond this season, beyond this episode. They're sometimes years long, and they have to worry about the next steps and the next steps. And Janae's come, like, I don't know. I was very confused by the whole process, to be honest with you. Like when I said I was disappointed, a lot of it was disappointed in what has been a very good strategic mind in Janae the last couple of seasons of All Stars, making what I thought was a huge mistake here. So
I agree.
Yeah, like I don't see the benefit of how she approached it, and even trying to fix it after the fact as well was a real like mess. So I don't know what's going to happen to their friendship. Kellyanne seems a type that she, would probably hold it against her. But then also if you kind of came to her and gave her a big hug and, talked it out properly and emotionally and shed a couple of tears, she'll probably do the exact same thing and, come back to you as well. So I don't know. Kellyanne's a feeler, and it just depends how she feels on the day, I guess.
You bring up a great point, because I agree. Janae's game for me, I'm a big Janae fan. I probably will continue to be a big Janae fan after the season as well. But I feel like there was so many strange moves being made by her. And I had Troy in my DMs because, me and him do talk every now and again. After the first recap that we did, he said he watched it and really enjoyed it, but he said there was a lot of context missing in that episode. He didn't specify what that context was because obviously he's under contract. He can't talk about anything on the show or give anything away, which I would never put him in that position. But I kind of feel like maybe some of that context that was missing could have been around this move of targeting Kellyanne first and why Janae and Grant is going this way. Because we hear certain conversations, like when Kellyanne and Janae sit out on the grass having this conversation, Sarah's sort of looking at them. And she runs back with information saying, I thought we all had a plan. So it feels like there's a lot of peer pressure that are being put on Janae currently. And maybe the fact that she's coming back after not having been a part of the main show. She's now playing, let's be honest, All Stars is the B League compared to the A League, which is the main show. She's finally getting an opportunity to play with some of these big names again, like Bananas and Jordan and Wes. And, you know, she's now with Tori and like people who are consistently coming back for the main show. Maybe it's a little bit of a case of her wanting to prove herself to some of these vets that are playing in the main show at the moment. And that is putting some pressure on that relationship that is from the All-Star season.
Well, we saw I think one of the, at least what they showed us, felt like one of the catalysts for Janae's selection was when Casey and Tori were talking to Janae, just the three of them. And I was like, oh, is this the way Casey gets her like relationships really strong? You could see her, maybe it's a little bit under the radar, but the camera got her kind of going, you know, yeah, Kellyanne said she's coming for the big one. I was like, that means she's coming for you. And you could just see her like planting seeds, and Janae's like, and Tori's there. So she's with the big dogs, the recent winners of the flagship, and she's feeling like, hey, I'm a winner too. Like this is
I'm a part of this crew.
Yeah, I'm this is me now. And
so she's getting gaslit, is what you're saying.
A little, I don't know, maybe not gaslit necessarily, because she did a lot of that to Kellyanne herself, actually. But certainly persuaded, I'll put it that way. And I thought it was interesting to know that Janae coming in, a champion in her own right, back to back. She's older. She's a mom. She's kind of confident in her own skin, and then gets around like what is the cool kids, I guess, and kind of goes with the clique, goes with the crew. And I thought that was a really fascinating thing to see, actually.
Yeah, it's a great observation. And I want to backtrack it to that conversation that Janae had with Kellyanne. I was so confused by that. And I think that in the moment, Janae was extremely conflicted about the move. She probably does have somewhat of a friendship with Kellyanne outside of the game. And I feel like she did sleep on it, did feel bad, did decide to actually throw Jody in, who she's got no relationship with whatsoever, which, by the way, is also from the All-Stars season. So it just so happens that the All-Stars players are getting targeted immediately, which to me tells me that the mainstream show definitely has some sort of an alliance. There's definitely something being pushed towards some of these All-Stars coming into the game. But I digress. She has this conversation, and it feels so unnecessary for her to go and have this conversation just to go and backstab Kellyanne by the end of this and throw her in any case.
So you don't think it was intended from the get-go? You think she changed her mind after the conversation, or she misled her intentionally?
I think Kellyanne. I think Janae, in her heart, did not want to, and listen, we'll probably find this out after the season when they do the interviews, but I feel like in her heart she didn't want to throw Kellyanne in, but she felt pressured by the other big teams, and she thought, if I don't do it, I'm going to be a target next time. I really think that is where it happened. But I found it interesting that the only person who was giving her a green light not to throw Kellyanne in was one who publicly said it was okay to throw Kellyanne in, but privately told Janae, hey, don't throw Kellyanne in, and it's Wes.
Yeah. Wes is playing both sides as he keeps teaching.
He's in the shadows.
You're right. I certainly hope that there was a real intent behind it, because otherwise she just led her so far along completely unnecessarily. If she was always going to vote her in, then going that hard in trying to convince, it's not Survivor. She didn't need to convince her because she's going to scramble or whatever. She's already one of two that are going down. She didn't have to kind of throw that hard to distract her or throw her off. I don't know. And then when you think about the actual choice itself, like if the pressure had to be so strong for her to, and you had to assume that Kellyanne was 100% going to lose.
Mm.
Like the risk was too big to have her come back after you said what you said. Like she said, 4 hours before you told me we're in this together. You know, like I don't, that pressure that was not shown in context would have to have been very strong for that choice to be made, because, and if it was going to be that way, I would have taken the approach of like, look, they all want you in. That's why you're one of the two picks. All right. They're telling me that I don't want to ruin my game. I'll be honest with you. I'm very, very torn right now because you're my friend. I don't want to do this, but look, I'm next if I don't do this. So, you know, put it out on the table.
She wasn't very upfront. Yeah, she wasn't very upfront and honest. And she came across this episode as very insincere, which is not a great look on Janae, who I know is a fan favorite. And I don't know if the edit had something to do with it, if there was conversations we didn't see. But, you know, from Kellyanne's reaction, it looked like it was a very bad betrayal, and that those conversations, the reason behind why she can't back Kellyanne in this game, that was never made clear to Kellyanne in any case. But you mentioned that, you know, you thought that if Kellyanne was to go in there, she would have to lose for you to betray her like that. But, you know, we spoke about Emily's physique last week, you know, and how absolutely ripped she is. The same can be said like for Kellyanne. Like Kellyanne looks like every time she comes back, she's like Benjamin Button, and she just gets in better and better shape. The older she gets, the better.
The yoga really works.
Geez, I need to start doing yoga. I want a physique like that. I want to be more ripped, you know?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'm just wondering if they really, like, I don't know how much Kellyanne played into that versus whether they thought how low they think of Tristan versus Nelson. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where the equation
We're going to talk about
to make
Nelson.
That choice.
We're going to talk about Nelson. But let's leave that to later on in the podcast, because there was a lot going on with Nelson. There's a lot of people that have played with Nelson before. He yet comes back every single season, and I have to ask why. I think probably the biggest reason for them to bring him back is because Nelson is like this excitable puppy dog that is out there. He's harmless, just wants to be pet, and just wants to be given some attention. And, you know, he was trying to get a lot of attention from Yui this episode. And, you know, he's moving fast on this. I thought he was still feeling something for the girl from last season. He's out here pretty much straight afterwards, and he's planning on getting his mom to go and visit her in Argentina.
That's Nelson, man. That's Nelson. He's always thinking a few steps ahead, maybe way too many. But yeah, I did get like, up until then, I was like, the first episode when they actually chose partners and stuff, I was like, oh, is Nelson going to do the thing that he always does and he falls in love? And then I was like, no, it's not really happening. Then I was like, hey, man, don't say your mum's going to visit it. Like, that's a bit much. Like, you'd kind of take
what's going on? And he's been pretty, it's Olivia, right? And he's been pretty bad or harsh on her after the season, because apparently she wasn't playing open cards with him. Well, I'm pretty sure all of this stuff happened like within weeks after the Challenge 38 that they went out there to film. So it definitely felt to me like he was trying to make a move on Yui in this moment.
It's
fun.
He's a social player. He's a social player.
He's politicking.
Maybe too social.
The other player that to me was very interesting to observe this episode, and you know, we continue to learn more of some of these new MVP players that are coming into the game, is Benja. And he seems to be a player that I'm going to get very frustrated seeing play this season. Because
what are you,
it's all
Jody
about,
or something?
It's all about mateship. Like, you know, that like we get over in Australian Survivor, some people want to play mateship, and it's about getting these great relationships and being an authentic human being. And I feel like he doesn't fully get what show he's on. I was feeling Jody's frustration, and I feel so bad for her that she has gotten stuck with him this season, because I don't think they're going to go very deep. I don't think he knows where he's at.
No, he's fun though. Like I was like, just, you know, that thing where it's cringe, but you also love it at the same time, about how awkward it is, that it's like, oh, I don't like that it's happening, but I'm smiling because it's so fun. Was when, like he's telling her, you're amazing. She's like, okay, we're amazing. He's like, you're amazing. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the toilet now. And I'm like, it just sums up like she must have been like, we saw in episode 1 that she was like looking skyward just to avoid eye contact, and now it's like
Anybody
she's
would
trying to
be,
do it. Yeah, now she's trying to do it like every episode. Like she even said to him to his face, "You understand this game's not fair now, right?" And he's like, "I still don't think he's like, oh yeah, but I will not play because the game will not do that to me." And it ended up being right. It was such a weird thing how he
he
goes,
was
"There's
so
no way."
lucky.
He goes, "The game will not put me against another Argentinian." We're like, "We'll see you next week, mate. We'll see you next week, Bernard."
I feel like the show is setting it up for Rodrigo and Benya to go into an elimination against each other, because you just know that at some point they're going to try and eliminate Argentina from the game completely. And we might have that first team out sooner than later. There's already 2 players down, so they're only 2 from 4 still in the game right now. Who's going to go to bat for these 2 teams? And that puts Naya in danger as well.
Well, when you look at the partners as well, Jody and Naya are probably the least connected of the legends that are left, or maybe except for Kellyanne now. But Naya's certainly close with Jordan, but that's pretty much it. She was in the All-Star season, but I didn't see her network getting very strong, unlike some of these other competitors. So when you pair that with being on the Argentinian teams, it doesn't look good for Naya and Jody, that's for sure.
Another interesting conversation that we see happen here in this episode is Tori talking to Ben and Danny, and she says to them that the game has now changed. The Legends came in here with a plan, and now we're having to vote each other in. So it makes me think that, thank goodness, because this is what's been making the show so boring for the last couple of seasons, because these returnee players keep going back. They keep playing the same alliance. And it's like Groundhog Day. We see the same 4 players or 6 players reach the end every single season. I feel like they should start bringing this format back to the main show, where they get forced to stay with the newbies in the game. I was so fearful after this elimination we were going to get a twist where they could choose partners and the game could get muddied up by 2 legends somehow ending together in the game, because that to me is boring TV. I want to see new players go deeper. I want to see legends having to betray each other in the game. So she finds it really upsetting that the game's not predictable like it's been in the last couple of seasons. But I am extremely excited by this, Kahuna.
Yeah, I mean, I found it interesting that she said the quiet part out loud, and the editors actually left it in, that they talk about pre-gaming to the point where it's game breaking. Like a lot of the times it's game breaking. The people that come in, and we're talking about, like, I know it's a TV show and it's entertainment and it's off the back of the real world and road rules and stuff, but when we're talking about $1 million prizes, and it's so rigged against the people that are coming, like some of the European, maybe not this season on World Championship because of the format, but the general one that they do with the MTV flagship, have some of the European players come in. They can't even speak to each other in the same language. They can't, they haven't been on the show before. They're Survivor players or, idol singers and Dancing with the Stars contestants. And then they come into a viper pit of players that have been playing together for decades and have a format which they can exploit to the point where it gets them across the line. And yeah, like they're now seeing that, hey, like, we're split up. We can't do what we wanted to do. And Tori let a little, like, I know Danny's on her team, but Ben was there as well. And she's letting a little bit of inside source out, that we do plan like that. We do strategize like that. And it makes them feel that little bit less trustworthy. You know what I mean?
I think Tori knows whatever she tells Danny will probably make its way to Ben and Sarah. I mean, the Survivor Alliance is going to be something to be reckoned with here in this season. And, Ben is being also advertised as a player this season, someone we should get behind, because I feel like they're giving him good content. We get that next day in the house, he's busy cleaning up after himself. He shows us where, his bag of tricks in this game is, and where he hides all of the cutlery and dishes, so that he always has that, and tells future challengers to also look out for that as well. But I really enjoyed this fun scene of Ben, because, for so long, people have been so hard on Ben and they've stereotyped him, I think, as something that he isn't. And this is showing a very fun and different side of him, seeing this scene with him cleaning up after everybody, and then also him being there to support Kellyanne the next day as well, as she is struggling as well. It shows a different side to him.
Yeah, Ben. I've always loved Ben. I didn't. Yeah, I never really understood the criticism. I do, however, I don't like the fact that he said the hiding spot for the dishes is in the cupboard. Isn't that the first place people are going to look,
obvious.
Ben? Yeah. I was like, okay,
but
Ben,
maybe it's
good spot.
Maybe it's because it's that obvious that he thinks no one's going to look there. They're like, it's too obvious.
He's like flipping it
4D
around.
chess.
There's levels. Yeah, that's Ben.
Yeah.
Man.
They're playing checkers.
Winner.
He's playing chess. He plays chess. They play checkers.
Yeah, they're only looking on the counter for their dishes. They don't look in the cupboard like, silly challenges. Yeah.
And also even the confessional that him and Casey had together while the challenge was going on, I found to be so fun. Like, I was like, again, who is this Casey? Casey seems to have more fun with Ben and her team. Casey is enjoying the season without Nani, without Fessy, without Josh out there. I think that it's a different side of Casey we're seeing, and Ben is bringing that lightheartedness out of her, I feel like, in the confessionals.
I wonder if she feels like lighter. Like she's already got her chip. She doesn't need to worry about the pressure of becoming a champion. She is a champion coming into this. She doesn't have to get Nani her championship and try to worry about getting her there or her brother, or anything like that. And she doesn't have Fessy and Josh like making sure that she's in on their plans and saving them when they need to and all that. So she's
trying to prevent them from fighting, because they always want to fight in seasons as well. It's
playing
like two brothers.
So she's kind of like a little bit free and loose and kind of enjoying it. And I like this look on Casey.
It's good.
And I like that she takes advantage of Paramount Plus's ability to swear. Like, I still always get caught off guard when I'm watching and they just drop an F-bomb. I'm like, oh, yeah, I like that. They speak like actual adults in the real world sometimes. And it's so weird to know that the same people will give a confessional flawlessly with no swearing, but then can just come out and bust another one out with all the swear in there. And they self-censor so well. It's remarkable.
I know this is going to be a hot topic and a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this because they'll always be like, more challenge is better. But I really enjoy the Paramount Plus template for the challenge. I like the slightly shorter episodes for it to be a little bit more cut to the actual gameplay and what's happening. But again, I'm a new school fan. I'm coming from that Survivor fandom where I wanted to be about the strategy. I wanted to be about the competitiveness. So maybe the things we don't see is some of the things the old school fans really enjoyed. But I will also argue that these people are getting older. They're not hooking up as much as they used to. They're not clubbing as much as they used to. So I feel like sometimes they just put that in there and it kind of almost don't make sense. Like you get these people in All-Stars hanging out, but it's kind of like they're getting too old for it. Let's be honest.
Talk about the kids and their arthritis pain medication and stuff like that eventually, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like what hair dye are you using these days to keep it, so it's not grey? So that's what the discussions happen.
We're going to have some people coming for us after this, Kahuna. How dare we say this about the OGs? But, another thing that I was going to say is what I really like about this is because it's going to be less episodes. Each episode's going to matter a little bit more. This episode did feel a bit filler, but I'm sure the rest of the season we're going to have that full cycle. And it's just due to the way that the premiere played out that we had this kind of strange episode 3. But I think it's going to be tight from here on. It's going to be about 12 episodes. It's not the normal 18 or 19 episodes where, you've got this first 8 or 9 rounds that don't really matter because it's all these new players that are getting voted out easily in the game because the legends are playing together. So it's almost like when you watch sports where sometimes you don't watch the whole season, you watch the playoffs because the playoffs is the most interesting part. I feel like the World Championships is going to be like that. The whole thing from here on out is going to become like playoffs because they're already talking about potentially throwing Wes in next week. And that's going to be a big move if that's happening.
Yeah, like when we looked at the lineups, there wasn't a lot of the fodder there. And now I see why Nelson was on there. So he can be that first boot if needed or, that sort of thing. But it's going to get juicy in a couple of weeks. Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It could be next week.
Yeah.
If people are going to try and take a shot at Wes, it could be next week, and I don't know how many people are going to be willing to walk in front of a bus for Wes either, because he is playing this middle game and he's playing the middle game with people who this is not their first rodeo. Like, they all know what Wes is about. They know that that is how he likes to play the game. So yes, he's got friendships now with Bananas and the likes, but I don't think Bananas is even as well connected as he's been in the past sometimes. I don't know if he necessarily has that, people looking up to him as the big banana man outside of the guy who's trying to learn from him, Benja, this episode. I don't know if anybody else looks at him like that.
I mean, Grant Crap definitely doesn't. If you listen to him, Kiki seems to be, enjoying Bananas. Like his company, hanging out with him quite a bit.
I think Bananas would be an awesome.
Does.
I think Bananas would be an awesome type to hang around with. Like, I think, because I like people who don't take life too seriously. I think he doesn't take life too seriously, and I think I don't know if I would want to play the game with him, but I think he would be nice to hang with outside of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. He's Peter Pan. He's the perpetual child, and then a lot of times that's fun to hang out with. Probably more difficult to be, in a relationship with, and all that sort of thing. But certainly fun to have a beer with, for sure.
Yeah. Now, in this episode, talking about, Kiki and Bananas, I don't know if there's really anything there, but we do know that Kaz and Theo used to be in a relationship together. Now, I'm not too well versed with their history. I've never really watched Love Island. I know Chantel would probably be the best person to give me the goss on that, but it's not my kind of show in general. It's interesting seeing them talking to Rodrigo in this episode, and he's a bit of a counselor here, with Cass and Theo potentially thinking of working together in the game. Both of them are kind of playing the game. They've never really spoken since they broke up. How awkward would it be to play in a game such as this with your ex? Because it's someone you've had this relationship with before. You didn't end well. You stopped talking to each other. And the first time you're forced to talk to each other is in a game where you have to trust them.
Yeah, I mean, I think people that go on these shows, though, are wired differently. They know that, like, they've been on reality shows before. They've kind of live in that world. They're social influencers, all that sort of thing. And I think they see the matrix code behind it. They know that we're on TV show, regardless of whatever feelings happened before. We're gonna do something here to actually make something work. And like, that sounds very cynical. They could be very genuinely wanting to rekindle or at least be friends after a tumultuous time apart. And when you look at who they are, like, they'd be great to work together. Like, obviously they'd be, you'd want Theo on your side. By the way, Theo, when they were doing that discussion, like doing the whole Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park open chest lying down thing, Theo, like, genuinely, he's 6'5" or something, right? And we know that the sprinter, like Olympic level sprinter, for the longest time, I was like, he's obviously very fast, but because he had that competition sprinter physique, it's very lean and like a greyhound. And now he's
bulk
out of competition. He's like thick daddy with 6'5" frame and can run the way he does. I'm like, man, if he gets in a hall brawl, I reckon he'd destroy Fessy. I reckon, like, people like Fessy, like,
I don't know.
Even
listen,
Zach, like,
listen, maybe Zach. I don't know about Zach, but listen, let me put respect on Fessy's name. I know, like, people like to bag on Fessy, and they're probably gonna be like, "How dare Chris defend Fessy in this situation?" Fessy has actually played, contact sport. I don't know if Theo has. I don't know if I would say the person.
Okay, maybe not whole brawl. Maybe okay.
The person.
Yeah, that's
the person,
a very different beast.
Yeah, it's like, I've got a history in martial arts. I've done karate for a very long time, and I've said this many a times. People all think that they can fight, but yes, everybody can fight, but everybody doesn't know how to fight. Everybody doesn't understand the anatomy of the body. Like, limbs can only bend certain ways. So if you go against that, you break an arm. For instance, it's very
no one
technical.
No,
but it's it's the stuff you get taught, right? So when you're in a physical battle, and this guy has trained, he was nearly at the top level. Like, you can dislike him. There's nothing wrong with disliking Fessy. I'm not the biggest Fessy fan myself, but I will give him respect that he probably would take most people out if it was to be in a hall brawl. The one person I would love to see him go up against, though, because this is a person who's also got experience at a physical sport, and who also did pretty well, is Rogan, because Rogan is a great rugby player and he is also pretty built. So I think Rogan going up against Fessy, that's the whole brawl we need to see. But I don't want to see it that badly that I want both of them on the show again. But
yeah,
so I don't want
maybe
people
not
to listen to this.
Maybe not whole
Production,
but I do think
ignore
Theo, bulked up Theo, Jack Theo would be like the most complete athlete on the show, probably. Like well-rounded and stuff. And he's got puzzles, he's got the whole lot. But I was just remarking, I was like, oh, he's like real big now. Like he looks like a
him and
bulky
Sarah
dude,
together.
you know?
Him and Sarah together legitimately is something that should be feared, because
Yeah,
Sarah
absolutely.
is probably the best, I think, rookie girl coming in. Like, it's debatable. Kaz is pretty good as well, but she's definitely somebody that has that aura, the fear element coming in, and she carries herself in such a way where I don't think people want to go head to head with her necessarily in the game. You know, so having the both of them together, that's a fear factor in the game, which would be shocked if they get thrown in early on. And it does look like the US alliance and the people that are in that US team will dominate this game in a big part. I think their biggest competition is Australia at this point, with the UK kind of falling apart and not really having each other's back.
Yeah. I mean, that survivor mentality, the cutthroat, like they're in it to win it for sure. And they've got 3 absolute, like, you know, guns as far as 2 survivor winners and then 2 challenge winners. And then there's like, it's pretty impressive. And we mentioned physical sports. Danny, like being an NFL player.
Oh yeah, Danny, obviously.
Age maybe now might not be a thing, but yeah, if they have Hallball this season, that'd be fascinating to watch as well with some of the players they've got.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I mean, obviously, I don't watch NFL, but I'd be interested to know what position both Fessy and Danny played. So if someone's listening to this at a later stage, comment below. Let us know if you know what positions they both played in, and who do you think will beat the other one in a hall brawl. Like, my money is on Danny. You know, it's that old man strength. You know, he's not that old, but I mean, you know, I reckon he can do it. Just like I think CT could still take Fessy. It's another, you know, CT's got that scrapper street fighter mentality. So we've seen Fessy and CT go head to head once on the truck on that season where they had to like wrestle on top of a truck, and Fessy couldn't move him.
No. When CT doesn't want to be moved, like he's not getting moved, like, that's for sure. So they're all like fantasy matchups. You should do an episode one day of just like what, you know, fantasy matchups you'd like to see, like the best eliminations possible and stuff. That'd be great.
100%. No, we definitely should put that on the whiteboard and come back to it and get Drew and Chantal involved as well, because I know they would have their own ideas as well. But another thing I wanted to bring up here, Grant, you know, he takes a massive back seat this episode. You know, he was the MVP for the first, you know, literally and figuratively the MVP for the first 2 episodes coming in. He is sort of happy for Janae to be the one calling the shots here. I was a bit disappointed in Grant to a certain degree, because I feel like, hey, you should be taking, I feel like he's taking too much of a backseat and trusting too much in Janae at this stage in the game. And he should always have his own interest in mind as well in the game. How did you feel about Grant kind of wanting to deflect and not have any of the heat come his way? But when the call out came, it came from Grant. So it made it look like it wasn't. So I feel like he didn't accomplish his plan.
Yeah, when you're in a partnership like that anyway, it's going to come back to you regardless. Like he didn't realize that it was him involved so much that even after the win, when he went up to Tristan, it was like, mate, I thought you weren't going to win. And he was just kidding, because that's what we would do in Australia. Like, oh, mate, didn't think you'd come back, you know. But really, you're like,
Tristan
saying,
was like,
yeah, he was like, we know, man. Like, what the hell? So Grant was so detached from the decision-making process that he wasn't even accountable for the fact that he sent him in, right? He verbalized it. But yet, I don't like it, especially when you see that I think Janae probably made a wrong decision there, or at least it didn't work out for them. And not only did he give her complete agency, I felt like there was a couple of moments in some of the confessionals where he was almost like the devil on the shoulder telling her to do it. Because he kept dropping lines like, oh, you can't put up with friendships. It's all about, you know, you got to win. Don't worry about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, mate, like that's exactly what the problem is. So he was either neutral or for taking out Kellyanne, and there was no forethought. Like, even when like Emily was asked, what are you going to do? He's like, I don't know. It's up to her. He just like no idea. So I thought that was an interesting, you know, take on it. He's trying to avoid heat, but heat's going to come no matter what. So you got to be able to at least have some say in the decision if you're going to stand behind it. Because if it's a decision
Mm.
that you don't necessarily like, you're going to put up with the consequences either way. He seemed to agree with it anyway. He was like, "Yeah, throw it in. I don't care." So seems he got what he
He's
wanted, I
like
guess. It just didn't
he's
seem
like
that way.
that. He's like that guy when there's wedding planning that needs to happen. He just leaves it up to the missus, and just shows
Yeah,
up on the
that's,
wedding day, kind of. But
yeah, that's right.
I feel like there's a lot that happened there behind the scenes that, someone like Troy, I know at the very least we'll get Troy to come on the show at some stage and talk about the season. He probably will give us a lot of behind the scenes because I have a sneaky suspicion that Team Australia and Team USA are working together and that there were conversations had between those two parties in regards to who they wanted to go out there. And that's why Emily and Troy was also trying to think, hey, let's see where this vote is going to go because we're trying to have this cross-country alliance with the USA in the game. And, the UK, obviously, they're already down in numbers. So it's not really like there's too many people that's going to be annoyed with them. And then obviously Jordan and Tori are very close. And Jordan is telling Tori, we're not playing this UK versus USA game. We're playing an individual game. The countries are not going to matter. And Danny is even picking that up in this episode. He has that confessional where he says, it seems like it's not going to be that much of a country team game. It's going to be an individual game. So because I don't have many friends in the game, I feel like I can move a little bit easier.
Yeah, he doesn't have the entanglements that, Tori has already advertised to him that she came into the game with. That there's all these pre-alliances, that all these masters that she's trying to serve, Like, it'd be interesting to, like you said, if you can get Troy on and talk about that. By the way, that'd be great for this episode because the only scene that Troy got was that Grant one, and he didn't say a word. I was like, oh, Troy got done by the edit on this episode so bad. He went missing.
Amber as well. Amber only had one confessional, obviously Troy's partner, and that one confessional was, I thought I could trust Janae, but now I don't know so much, So that's another really bad thing. I feel like, and that's the reason I brought it up, I feel like Grant and Janae is in a very bad spot because Janae is a two-time winner. Grant has just won off the bat the first two challenges, of the season. So clearly people are going to look at them and say, well, this is a threat. We need to deal with them rather sooner than later. And I don't think many people are going to try and protect them. Emily might be one of the few because Emily's got this great relationship with Grant from her previous season.
Well, it turns out that, what we said last week, maybe Jordan didn't want to win the first challenge and let Janae and Grant get there. He was right. Like, it turned out to be a really difficult decision to make to the point where they're now in a worse position than had they come second and let someone else win that last week. Because forced to a decision where Janae put her best friend on the line, who came back, is now pissed, and you've got people in the house not being able to trust anything that you say, knowing what you said to her and that you would throw your best friend in. What are you going to do to someone that you don't have that relationship with? So, yeah. It's a tough look for both Janae and Grant after a pretty stellar week last week.
Yeah. Well, you spoke about it a few times. I've danced around it enough in this podcast, but let's finally get into the Nelly tea of it all. Nelly has this master plan that he has with Janae where if he ties his hair up, it means he wants Tristan. If he leaves his hair down, it means that he wants Benja to go up against him in the elimination. What did you think of this master plan? And did you find it as hilarious as me that Nelson actually thought he could persuade Janae to do what he wanted down there?
Nelson, first of all, can I just say, I don't know if you're aware, Chris, but real world happenings at the moment, Nelson got into a very serious car accident this week.
Yes, I saw that. That's like, and I just wanted to say, I don't follow social media very often because I find, especially around the challenge, sometimes it can be very negative. So I try and absorb small bits and pieces of social media. But even for someone like me who's in and off social media a lot, even I heard about this. So it was big. And, obviously our thoughts go out to Nelson. We hope he has a speedy recovery as well. But yeah, go ahead and let the listeners, for those that may not have seen it, know what happened with Nelson.
Yeah, just a very serious car accident with some pretty critical injuries. He was actually dragged out of a flaming car that was on fire. So And there's been some stuff around that as well, that the person who pulled him out was actually, like, I think an NFL player or something along those lines. But I don't want to get into the details too much, but I just wanted to shout out to Nelson. He's obviously healing at the moment, and we do hope he recovers. I just found it so, like, weird timing that on the week where he had a pretty bad accident, he unfortunately the episode doesn't paint him in the best light either. Like, as far as you're talking about, he's trying to bring up this strategy with Janae, and I was sitting there going, what are you talking about, Nelson? Like, what you're gonna put your? Why would you possibly? There's only one choice. Why would you ever choose Benya? Like, you think who he's gonna say? Yeah, let's go with Benya. Like, there's no chance of going against Jody Benya. And then later he brings that out as well. He's like, I put my hair up because we're gonna go against Tristan. We need to keep Benya in my alliance. He's a vote for us. And the whole time I'm like, why are you talking like you're like it's strategy? Like, of course, you're stating the absolute most obvious thing, and he's coming out with tricks to tie his hair up. And Janae was like, yeah, okay, Nelson. Like, I know that thing. Like, I have 3 children, and the amount of times that I have to say in this exact tone, they'll like show you something, just like, yeah, yeah, and like, Daddy, look at this, this happens, and like, yeah, good one. And I felt that vibe from Janae, who has kids, and Nelson's like, I'm gonna put my hair up, and she's like, yeah, okay,
Whatever makes you
good.
happy.
Yeah, good one, Nelson. Yeah. So it was
Yeah,
pretty
listen,
great to see.
just further on to that, obviously, what happened to Nelson and any of the players, I don't care. Like, listen, sometimes the reason I stay off social media is because I feel like people, and there's the counter argument that fans will have. They're putting themselves out on a public forum, so because they're public, and they're out there and they're playing this game, we have the right to bag them, we have the right to hound them in their personal life. I personally am of the belief that you should look at what happened on the show as something separate. It is a game, and leave people in their social life outside of that separate. Like, leave it separate. Let people live their life, criticize their game. And that's how I look at Nelson, who I do like as a character on the show. I think maybe he's come back too often in recent seasons, and I would like to have 3 seasons without Nelson, and then he can come back again, probably at this stage.
It's a very
but
specific number.
I'm just putting it out there. I feel like we should have a stand down period for challenges. Like, they come in, they play 5 seasons in a row, mandatory 3 seasons rest or something like that, just so we can continue to have a new group of OGs, a new group of legends created on the show, and also so we can keep it fresh so that the pre-gaming isn't as prevalent, in the show. And with Nelson, I kind of feel like we've seen quite a lot of him recently. He's continued to fail. He doesn't have enough time in between seasons to prepare and come back a better athlete. Or I was going to say a better athlete. He's a great athlete, but to come back, smarter and maybe do the puzzles or think about technique or strategy. And to be honest with you, by the end of this episode, I kind of doubt if Nelson's got it. Like, some people have it and other people don't have it. Another person like that is Anissa. She's come back so many times. She doesn't have it. She's never, and somebody's going to clip this and they're going to play it back one day when Anissa finally wins All-Stars Senior Edition and they're all over 50. She might go and win it. But I don't think that she's ever going to win it because she just doesn't have it. And I don't think Nelson has got it. I just don't think, he gets into pressure situations, he fails, and he flames out. This elimination, and I'm almost gobsmacked. I don't know what to say. This is how bad it was. Like, you've got Tristan on the other side showing you the technique that you need to be using to collect these pieces. And he can't take 5 seconds to look at Tristan to see what he's using as a technique and to copy it. He continues to fail and run into the wall and hit his head, hoping for a different result. That is the definition of madness, Kahuna. And he wasn't listening to anybody that was shouting instructions at him.
The faces some of these people pulled was similar to what I just saw from you, Chris. Just the bananas one. He was just they could not understand what they were looking at. That they're instructing him, they're giving him clear guidance. Don't stop her, and he just keeps doing it over and over again. It was fascinating to watch. It was so fun, And well, he did get one. And the only time he got one was when Kellyanne dropped it. If it wasn't for that middle, like, no man's land, they would have had zero, nothing. Like, it was so dominant one sided. And I don't even know if Kellyanne and Tristan were actually, like, good at it. They were proficient for sure. I don't think they were dominant. I don't know. Like, there was just
in
zero
comparison to
competition.
Nelson.
Yeah. So could another team have got on and maybe blown Kellyanne and Tristan out of the water? Who knows? But Nelly did nothing. Like, he gave her, like, brain rattling by stopping her so suddenly all the time. Poor Hui had whiplash.
I don't remember the amount of seasons he's been on, but this is not his first rodeo. He's coming in as a legend. He's coming in as someone that has played this game for a very long time, questionable on the legend status. But, I thought this is in his wheelhouse. It's physical. Like, how does he not win a physical elimination? And I feel like you look at this, and again, like we said, what happened in his personal life is sad. We're completely bagging on him for the game here. But I kind of feel like this is the kind of performance that should make you retire or at least step down for a couple of seasons before you come back. And immediately afterwards, he knows he's got that call back because he's like, this sometimes happens. Sometimes it goes your way. Sometimes it doesn't go your way. The challenge teaches you these lessons because he can say that with comfort because he knows the MTV production team is already lining him up for season 39. He's on his way back out there to give us exactly the same performance. And this is, how I look at the challenge fandom I shouldn't be calling out the whole fandom, but when we get the same players going out there doing the same thing, getting the same result over and over, it's no different from seeing Nelson failing over and over again in this elimination because Nelson's going to go back. He's going to see a cute girl over there. He's going to flirt with her. It's going to be interesting for a while. He's going to do Nelly T stuff, be a great character on the show, but then he's going to flame out at some point. He's going to be too loyal to somebody. He might try and go in an elimination for somebody. But I feel like what can Nelson do on the show right now for us to make it interesting for him to come back, for us to see something that we have not seen yet? I don't know if he's got that extra gear in him, Kahuna.
Well, I saw something that we haven't seen before on the challenge, I don't think, is that they use clown music as part of the montage when he was doing his elimination. They played they literally clowned this man. And I'm like, how do you come back from that? But you're right. That is actually content. I'm sure the producer's seeing that. What would have been the worst nightmare is if both teams can't do it, right? When it takes forever and there's no real, but to have one team win and then another team give a laughable, funny performance where they're getting all these ridiculous reactions from the people up in the stands. They've got Nelly literally falling on his head sometimes. Like, I know what he was doing as well, right? Because it's not about technique for him. He's like, I'm muscle. I'm going to brute strength this and just throw her at the thing. And, like, I'm going to stop it.
He was calling her heavy.
Yeah, he's oh, Nelson. Yeah, man.
I feel like he's not getting the invite for him and his mom to go and visit in Argentina after she sees that confessional.
Heavy. He's never been like, I think Tori said he needs to go to a playground or something. I was like, has he never pushed himself on a swing like you do you put your legs out to go forward and your legs back to go backwards, and you need to build momentum so you can finally go over the top and turn inside out. That's what every kid thinks about when they're young. And he's obviously had a woeful childhood and never got to play on swings. Poor Nelson.
I think just to finish off on Nelson, because we're not going to get the opportunity to talk about him, I guess, the rest of the season. I think Nelson is a good dude. He's got a good heart outside of the game. He does have that loyalty, and that's something to be admired. I know we bagged him quite a bit here, but it's just in the performance that he's had, and just me kind of being tired of some of the players coming back the whole time and not learning and not improving, because life's about improving and learning and getting better. And I feel like he's not doing it, in some ways he's maybe even going backwards. This is probably the earliest he's ever been out of the game. So, but outside of that, I just want to say, Nelson, I hope you've got a speedy recovery, man. And that, hopefully give us a season or two before you come back. So I get excited to have some Nelly T content back, Be an improved Scuba Nelly when you hit the ocean, or become a Brainiac Nelly, somebody that can do really well in the puzzles. But I don't know. I just don't know if he's got it. That's my problem with him. But I want to move on from him. It's enough bagging on Nelly. Let's look at the team that ultimately wins. Tristan and Kellyanne does end up winning this one here. Tristan, I think, has had a really rough start, but now he's dodged a bullet. This does build a little bit of confidence. He's got an enemy in the game now, which is Grant and Janae, but I feel like they're going to fall in the trap of not focusing on the big targets, which is like Challenge 101 mistakes. There's a team that takes a shot, but in my mind, if I was playing this game, I would be thinking, who was pulling the strings? Who are the ones that asked Janae and Grant to do it? Because clearly this move wasn't made on their own. There was more happening behind the scenes, and you should try and focus on those. But do you think that this animosity going back into the house, we had that very awkward scene with Kellyanne and Janae in the room. Like, is there any way forward for these two teams? Or do you think it's just going to be they're going to take each other out while all the other teams are just going to move forward in the game?
I don't even know what impact Tristan and Kellyanne could have on Janae and Grant. They're not going to win the daily. They've shown so far their ability to win dailies is ridiculous. Tristan's the only UK bloke. UK's, well, except for Argentina now, one of the smaller factions. Kellyanne's on the outs with her best friend, literally, and the whole house wanted to vote her in. Like, there's literally no way out here. So when you talk about revenge and wanting to come back with animosity and stuff, like, it doesn't matter. There's no path for them that I can see, because who does and traditionally on the challenge as well, in order to avoid ruffling feathers, once someone goes in, the rest of the house just votes that same person in again, because they're already annoyed, they're already pissed off. You might as well, so you don't piss someone else off for voting them in for the first time. So I think they're going to be spending a lot of time in the sand, and with Nelly and Huhui out of the way, the competition starts getting a lot harder as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to finish it off on this scene that we had, Kellyanne and Janae having this conversation. It's, again, a bit of a weird way to finish it. Normally, we don't see the scene with them all going back home. And it does make me wonder if there is going to be a big blow up, or this blow up is going to continue into the next episode, because we do see Kellyanne and Janae having this conversation. And I've got to say, I kind of thought that some fists were going to start flying. Like, there was just this tension in the air where I was like, are they going to go like ham on each other right now? And because I feel like Kellyanne is this close, and it was a bit awkward to watch.
Yeah, if you're a body language expert, you can see Janae was like sitting on the bed, legs crossed, and kind of a little bit in herself. And Kellyanne was like pressing on her aura kind of thing. She's like really kind of intense vibes towards her. And great editing, by the way, when she goes like, enough! And like it did the shaky screen and kind of echoey voice and made it seem really like, full on. It's like, good job on that. But Kellyanne has scary vibes on her own. And, I hope not. She's been around the block for a while. She knows what she's doing. She's a television veteran. I hope the camera will stop any actual fisticuffs, because she doesn't want to go home and ruin future chances. I'm sure the paycheck's probably very nice for them. So she knows where the limits are. I'm hoping she's not going to be pushed past it. And, they're friends.
The last person... the last person we saw removed for violence was Fessy, actually, for throwing the water or the cup at Josh, I believe. That was the last time we saw it, because I was going to say it was a Turbo. It does happen every now and again, but it's normally men that get to that point. So hopefully, that won't happen. It's just an interesting way to end the show. It was a little bit different from what we normally see.
Actually, one of the more recent real ones was Nelson, wasn't it? On Derek?
Nelson and Derek.
Yeah, Derek Kaczynski. It was like he just.
You mean
just
there was one after that.
No,
there was one after that. There was Final Reckoning, which was Pastagate, where Tony went back and he did a body slam.
Yeah,
that's probably the last one I can think of. So and again, another great. I'm sure Angel Cake is already done all the fights on the challenge, but another content that we can talk about at some stage in the off season. Let's talk about all these different fight moments
that'd be great.
Yeah. But for now, Kuna, I think we've spoken about everything in this episode. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up? Anything that you feel like we missed out on?
No, I want. There was something that you said earlier which sort of sat with me, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder if that could be a thing." How you were saying like that the same challenges come back over and over again. It does get a bit stale, knowing the same repetition, the same pattern that they can dominate. And we said that this new influx of players on the level of Survivor, like Survivor winners, not just Survivor in general, like we've said before, like a Jay and a Michelle is very different beast to a Sarah, Ben and Danny kind of thing.
Michelle is a winner, by the way, but maybe just one of those winners that sits back a little bit more, plays the social game. She's not necessarily a strategic force in the game of Survivor.
So, and we mentioned before, like it's very likely that this show would be a feeder for the flagship MTV. And I'm wondering if we see the likes of Bananas and stuff, who are the flag bearers, get outshone by some of these newer players coming in. Does the balance shift? And we said we're loving the more serious nature of the World Championship. We're loving the way they're doing the editing, the formatting. There's not as much of the drinking and partying anymore, and more focus on the serious challenge side of it. Does it start chipping away into that serious competition of Survivor World? That's why they're on CBS. That's why they're on the main channels as opposed to the youth-oriented MTV. And I'm wondering if it could actually flip, that the MTV becomes the feeder for the World Championship, or the USA or whatever becomes bigger. I don't know. I'd be fascinated to see how this plays out.
Yeah, it's a big call, because I think that is something that a lot of original fans of the show fear. And there was a lot of fear about the show going to Paramount Plus, CBS getting a cut into it, where people thought it was the end of the challenge as they knew it. And there was a lot of doom and gloom, I remember, on Reddit at the time. I didn't read a lot of it myself, but I was told by people who are on those Reddit forums quite a lot that they were very low on the Challenge USA, the Challenge CBS when it started. So I don't know if it will ever happen, but I think the producers are trying to do it. I do think that they're consciously trying to make this America's fifth sport, and have more of an athletic edge to it. They're casting more athletes to the show. I do still enjoy the lighter side as well, and having, people in there that, like, for instance, when the salad got stolen from Jodie, that was a great TV moment. You still want stuff like that. You still want characters. There has to be a balance between athlete and entertainer. But you could be right. I mean, I think the World Championship in itself should become the biggest thing that everybody wants to win, because it should be the best from the MTV show, the USA, the Argentinian franchise, which they're struggling culturally. We didn't even talk about that, but clearly they're struggling with the concept of the show. And then you've got Australia, which struggled with viewership. And then you've got the UK, who I think did okay with viewership. I could be wrong, but I'd say the UK is probably the most likely one to get another season at this stage. So there is also the fear that maybe we don't even get to see more seasons at this stage that can feed into the World Championship, and that it's a one and done. But rumor out there is that there is a USA season 2 that they're already starting to make casting calls out to. So clearly there will be the Challenge USA 2 at a very minimum that could still feed into a World Championship or into the main show. I'm open to it. I'm a bit more open-minded, but it's easy for me to say as a new school fan, as someone who really enjoys the competitive side of it, with the entertainment, obviously. But for those people that watch this for what it used to be, I think this is doom and gloom if that does happen.
I think you just have to think of them as different things. And because of the way the multiverse of media works, is that you can have different shows on different platforms that cater to different crowds. And the MTV one can and should always exist as the challenge. And now this new version, which could be a different type of show and is more serious and more athletic, becomes, not necessarily the flagship, because it depends what your favorite thing is, right? But it could be the bigger version, or the more mainstream, populous, larger number kind of show, whereas the MTV one will always be amazing in MTV. You know what I mean?
Well, I could be completely talking out of my ass here, but I think I saw numbers for the Challenge USA, and the viewership at one stage were higher than the main show. And that
Yeah,
was
because it's
because it was
CBS
on
versus MTV. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So like anything, money talks. And if the show's going to bring in viewers, if they're going to create a new audience of people, like, I mean, I know of Survivor fans that started watching the challenge because of the Challenge USA and then went on to watch 38 and are now watching World Championship, but they've never watched it prior to that. And they've asked me, how do I get into the show? How can I go back and watch some of the older seasons and things like that? So clearly it is working. It is bringing new fans to the show, but it's the old fans. And my heart goes out to the old fans because on Survivor, I am that old fan. I'm the fan that watched it from day one. And I don't necessarily like the direction that the game is currently going in sometimes and some of the changes that Jeff is making to the show. So my heart goes out to everybody that is an old school fan because I get what it feels like when the show you grew up loving is changing and you feel like you can't change with it. So, yeah, very interesting discussion. I think that it's one that we should deep dive on in a podcast at some stage again in the off season and talk about and even get our audience's opinions and views in a live so they can contribute to this because it's very hard right now doing this while we're pre-recording. We don't have that feedback from our live audience to tell us, Chris, you're absolutely wrong. You're being an idiot for wanting to get the party scenes out of the show, because that the likes of a Chris and Nikki, they would have been coming for me when I said that, and they're not here to do that right now. But Kuna, I think that's it here for this week. If you got to this point of the podcast and you really enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. It's absolutely free. And it really is the best way for you to help this channel grow. So the more people we have subscribed to the channel, the more guests we can bring on, the more credibility we have when we talk to big studios like Paramount or CBS. I've recently had some Survivor players come on to the show as guests. I'd love to do the same for the challenge. I'd love to get Nelly T on the show and to tell us why we were so wrong and what he was thinking when he was doing this elimination. So please consider subscribing. Please consider liking, putting the notification bell on because that way you get notified every time we go live on the show here. Kahuna, any final words there from your end?
No, awesome episode, man. Really good talking to you again. And the train is roaring now. All the World Championship's going, and the competition's going to get really good from here on out, I think.
I agree 100%. And on that note, we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.